and you never know where someone's going to end up, do you? I mean, looking through some of your past opponents, I mean, you know, in the salubrious grounds of Weymouth, you wrestled Cody
Cody Rhodes.
Rhodes, a few years back, and obviously that was at the time when he was really like taking every indie booking possible. He was everywhere in 2017 when he was just kind of starting to build that American Nightmare character. And then obviously fast forward 7 years later, and there I am in Philly watching him win the world title in the main event of WrestleMania. How was it working with Cody at this stage at that stage that he was in his career?
I think he obviously was just full of energy. He just wanted to work, 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 work. I was lucky enough to be put in a match and given a good amount of time to work with him. And he was, I think he was just so keen to just be wrestling and wrestle anywhere that he could against anybody that he could. And it was just a really good experience because he was giving he's not one of these guys who come in and right, we're going to do this, and this, and this is my match, and I'm not deviating from it. He really wanted to work a really good main event, and I feel that we did that definitely.
And I mean, I was there at that show in Bristol a year later where he kind of made a kind of tentative announcement. There was big news coming. This is the end of 2018, early 2017 to get the AEW announcement. I mean, it's just been as a fan of his, just been incredible to watch that trajectory, which I have a lot of respect for because it's a trajectory of self-belief and building
Self
brand
and betting on yourself. He could have stayed in WWE. He probably had a job for another 10 years, collecting a nice, healthy paycheck, and but he wanted better for himself. He wanted to push himself because he felt that he could be the man that he's become now. And sometimes you got to step out of that mold, either by your own choice and go out into the big wide world and try and make it, or if you're someone like Drew, who's another person that I've wrestled, Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway, he got let go. He went out into the big wide world and made himself a far better performer and came back and is, again, one of the top 3-5 guys in the world now because of that journey outside of the WWE machine. I think for some people, they do need that stand on their own 2 feet to really see where the ground lies, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, talking of people that have kind of really found their feet, I mean, 2024 has been Drew McIntyre's year. I mean, I would, for how he's been a veteran, as long as you've been a veteran kind of thing. I mean,
yeah,
he's in this year, in the feud that he had with CM Punk, just completely the best work of his career. And it's so satisfying when you've been a fan of someone for a long time, you've watched their evolution, to see someone just finally find their spot.
And I really think that's down to that change in how the WWE is working. I knew Drew from working with him on the Indies and then working with him at ICW. The guy's super duper intense. He's a great promo. He really draws the emotion out of the crowd. And this year kind of showed what he could do when he's probably given a bit more free reign with his promos. And it was nice to see that, they were just going back and forth, and Drew was right on some points, shall we say, and CM Punk was right on other points and stuff. It wasn't that's a bad guy, that's a good guy. You just got two guys that have got a disagreement in it. And I think, like you said, that's where sort of wrestling looks like it's heading, is very much more sort of real world, real life conflicts and disagreements. I think that makes much more compelling TV, because you're like, well, he is right from his point of view, and he's right from his point of view, and it's where you sort of sit in that dynamic as a fan, which is really good.
Yeah, it's the shades of grey element, isn't it? I mean, going back to when you and I became fans at the same time, we just grew up on larger than life gimmicks squashing people for years.
Yeah,
it was wonderful. But it's that thing that has been really since the Stone Cold days, really. Stone Cold and The Rock, this kind of, there isn't ever really a clear good guy or a bad guy. There's shades of nuance to everyone. And I mean, that feud, CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, the single best feud I've ever seen over a bracelet. I mean,
yeah. And I think that it's then evolved into, I think we're going to see very similar between Punk and Rollins going forward as well. I don't know the stories, but I believe that there was legitimate bad feelings there. And I think that, one of the stuff that I was taught is if you can turn something from they always used to say work yourself into a shoot, but this is almost like the reverse of shooting yourself into a work. Yeah. I think that you can draw off that real emotion, and that's what fans will then buy into, because if they can see the anger, the frustration, whatever it is that's real. I think that they can get behind that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and a great example of long form storytelling, which I think is where WWE's really come into its own in the last few years. You know, that feud with Punk and Rollins has been brewing for years. The seeds were sown at War Games 2023 when Punk.
Yeah, it's just been bubbling under the surface, and I think that there's been little looks to it and little nods to it, and then they get to fully execute it and go. And I think that sometimes you can have the best laid plans, which I think WWE did, and then injuries and stuff. And other elements sort of made them change course, and sometimes that produces the best thing when people are working show to show almost, but really sort of feeding off the crowd and feeding off the energy, and I think that's really good to see.